طيب, let us continue. So, the son of Adam doesn't perform any other deed that is more pleasing to Allah than the sacrificing of blood on the day of Eid. And again, it's not the blood that she's, emphasizing. That's the key thing here. Because I've seen people do strange things as well. I've seen people collect the blood of the animal in a jar. I've seen this quite a lot, actually. And I've never come across anything from the authentic sources of Islam, from the Quran, from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that would give me any indication as to what you're going to be doing with that blood. So that's something that we should watch out for, because Allah says that the blood will not reach him, nor will the meat reach him, nor will the meat reach Allah, but it is the taqwa in your heart. Meaning that the Qurban comes from a place inside the self where you made a decision that, oh Allah, I want to do something for your sake, purely for your sake, and I would like to sacrifice for your sake. So I'm going to take my money, whether it's 2,000 or 3,000 rands or whatever the amount is, and I'll purchase this animal and I'll have it sacrificed for your sake. It's that act of giving up some of your wealth in order to fulfill this ibadah. That is what really the sacrifice is about. So then she says that this animal will come on the day of resurrection with its hair, with its horns, with its hooves. And when she says this, it means it will come on the day of resurrection as your offering that you've given forth, right? It will be there as your gift that you've sent forth for yourself, of course. And then she also says that the blood will fall in a place near Allah before it even falls on the ground in front of you. And the last thing she mentions about this is, so purify yourselves therein, right? Purify yourselves therein. The hadith is narrated by Imam at-Tirmidhi and also in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. Further, Zayd ibn Arqam reports that the Prophet ﷺ said, what is the sacrifice? Somebody asked him, like, oh Messenger of Allah, what exactly is the sacrifice? And then he says, it is the way of your father, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And then they asked, so what is the reward for us in relation to the sacrifice? And then he said, there's a reward for every hair, every single. Now, of course, when it comes to a sheep, right? A sheep doesn't have hair like we have hair. It has wool. So technically it has fibers as opposed to having hair, but every single fiber will have a reward. And there will be the reward for the meat and anything else that is used for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of this will bring reward. And that which you give in sadaqah will also be a reward for you. So they asked the Prophet ﷺ, they asked for the wool, oh Messenger of Allah, like, is it for that we're going to get reward? And then he said, there's one reward for every strand of wool. And again, that is narrated by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad, as well as in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. So now that serves as our introduction, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And let us go to the questions, and we'll start off with the first question, which is, what is the ruling on the sacrifice? When we speak about the ruling, we speak about the hukm. Of the 5 ahkam, at-taklifiyya in the Shafi'i school, which hukm is applied to sacrificing an animal on Eid al-Adha? In other words, is it fard, is it sunnah, is it mubah, etc. So in relation to the Shafi'i school, the sacrifice on the day of Eid al-Adha is considered a sunnah mu'akkada, meaning it is an emphasized sunnah. Now the definition of sunnah is ma yuthabu fa'iluhu wa la yu'aqabu tarikuhu. That which the person who does it will get rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the person who leaves it off will not be held liable for punishment by Allah, right? Unfortunately, most people just focus on the latter part. Those who don't do it, they won't get punished. But that's not the part that we should focus on. We should focus on the fact that if I do this, Allah will reward me. So I'm going to look for the opportunity to do this. Of course, especially after we heard of how great, that reward actually is. So the only time the sacrifice of Eid al-Adha becomes obligatory in the Shafi'i school is if one vows to perform it, right? Now, vows and oaths and those things, people should be very, very careful of. I receive quite a lot of questions about if I made a vow to do this, then, should I do that? Should I do that? Did I break my vow, etc.? It's a very serious thing in Islam to make a vow, right? There are lots of ways to make dua to Allah and to draw closer to Allah and to stay away from sins, but stay away from vows. So this is by no means an encouragement to do vows. But if somebody vows as if they say, I owe Allah to perform a sacrifice, and I vow to do so, that would be a vow. Or I hereby owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to sacrifice this animal. Or somebody says, this animal is my sacrifice, right? In instances such as that, they could make it compulsory upon themselves. Why? Not because of the act, but because of the vow. As for the other part, we said it's sunnah mu'akkada, meaning that it's an emphasized sunnah. Whenever we hear this, we should understand it as an extremely important sunnah. The reward is multiplied, right? And the karaha, the disliked nature of leaving it off, is also something that we should take into consideration. Now, not performing the sacrifice, if you can afford to do so and you don't do so, that is considered disliked. It is considered makruh, okay? Especially in relation to the fact that for the Hanafis, right, it is regarded as wajib, right? It is regarded as obligatory. So now, when you have this type of difference of opinion between the madhahib, one madhab says it's sunnah mu'akkada, the other one says it's wajib. Generally speaking, we should always try to do khuruj min al-khilaf, to stay out of the ambit of where there's a difference of opinion. In other words, to do that which will regard or will make us safe, or it will keep us above board by both opinions. So if we consider the Hanafi school saying that it is obligatory, then to be safe, we rather do it so that we are safe by the Shafi'i madhab, and we are also safe in the Hanafi rulings as well. Again, if you can afford to do so. And this will now lead us into the next question as well. And the next question is, so what if I can't afford to do it? Because now we're saying, look, you must really try to do it. It is an emphasized sunnah. Another example of an emphasized sunnah is the sunnahs before Fajr, right? These are sunnahs that we just shouldn't omit. And the same thing applies to the witr salah, both of which in the Shafi'i school is regarded as sunnah mu'akkada, but for the Hanafis, again, it is regarded as a wajib, so that, it has to be done. So again, don't leave it off. But what if I can't afford to do it, right? Now, the sacrifice is only a confirmed sunnah for a person who is mukallaf, right? That's the first point. And who are able to sacrifice. Able means that they have the means whereby they can purchase an animal and they can have the animal slaughtered, or they can slaughter it themselves. And able, in terms of affordability, right, in relation to the Shafi'is again, means that you have enough to fulfill the needs of yourself and your dependents, those who depend upon you, those for whom you must give nafaqah, you must spend upon them to support their needs, both on the day of Eid as well as on the 3 days that follow it. So if you have that, and you have in excess of that, then you shouldn't be leaving the udhiyah off, right? There's actually no justifiable excuse for you to leave the udhiyah off. But if you don't have that, you don't have enough to fulfill an udhiyah after you've settled your own needs and the needs of your family, or you are not yet morally responsible, such as a child. And this is an important one, because often in our community, I see an emphasis on, no, I have to make a sacrifice for my child, and the child isn't even mukallaf yet. I mean, if you can afford to do so, by all means, but it's not a duty until the child is morally responsible or mukallaf. Nor is it a duty to do so on behalf of somebody who is, غير aqil, doesn't have the full intellect with them. Now, for the Hanafis again, the issue of affordability is key. It does not become wajib if you follow the Hanafi school to sacrifice on the day of Eid al-Adha unless you possess the nisab, right? For those of you familiar with Kitab al-Zakah, you would be familiar with the concept of nisab. Nisab is basically the minimum zakatable amount. Now, the minimum zakatable amount for the gold standard at present is just under 100,000 rands. And that's quite a lot. For the silver standard, it's significantly less, right? So for the Hanafis, if you have the nisab amount and it comes to the day of Eid al-Adha, it's wajib upon you to sacrifice. This is why in some communities in the world, if you've traveled, you may be able to attest to this. In many Hanafi communities in the world, practically every single household is sacrificing an animal on the day of Eid al-Adha. And the beauty in this, even though there's some things that we need to sort of be cautious of, but the beauty in this is that there's no time in the year, right? There is no time in the year in which the underprivileged people of this world have an abundance of meat as there is around Eid al-Adha, because there's so much sadaqah taking place. Most people, when they do the Qurban, the Udhiyah, they give either everything or most of what they sacrificed in sadaqah, but we'll speak about the distribution in a moment, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So then the next question comes, is it a confirmed sunnah for everyone in the family, right? So let's say you 7 people in the house, and now you heard that, look, it's sunnah mu'akkada, but we are 7 people, and that's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money. So the answer is for the Shafi'i school, it is a confirmed sunnah, yes, but it is sunnah mu'akkada ala al-kifaya. And I always found this one particularly interesting because there's a few instances where this becomes relevant, like in i'tikaf as well, right? There's a concept of sunnah mu'akkada ala al-kifaya. What does that mean? It's sunnah, so it is praiseworthy, it is recommended, it is a practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The one who does it will get rewarded. The one who does not do it will not be held liable or accountable in the year after. Mu'akkada being it's emphasized, so it's not just your ordinary sunnah, if we can even use that expression, but it is a degree above that, so it is emphasized. And then alal kifaya, right? So I'm sure anybody who studied fiqh would know the term fard kifaya. Right? There, the same word is being utilized, but that is in relation to a fard. Now we are speaking about in relation to a sunnah. So for a fard, it's easy to understand. Like a janaza in Cape Town is called a kifayat, right? From the word kifaya, because it's a fard kifaya, meaning that if a Muslim passes away, there are certain duties owed to that person that the entire community is responsible for, such that if some of the members of the community carry out those duties, the ghusl, the kafan, and the burial, then the entire community is basically let off the hook, so to speak. So that's in relation to a fard kifaya. But then how does it work with a sunnah kifaya? Because it's not like the entire community is going to be held accountable if nobody does it. So how is it alal kifaya? So basically, to simplify it, if the head of the household performs it, right? If the head of the household performs it, or in the case of other acts like i'tikaf, if some people in the community perform it, then it is no longer a confirmed sunnah for everyone else in either that community in the case of i'tikaf, or in the case of udhiyah and qurban, it is no longer a confirmed sunnah for those that he is obliged to support, such as the wife and the children and any other dependents, right? However, if they choose to also perform it because they have extra and they want to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's still praiseworthy and they should definitely carry on doing so. Now, don't get confused, because this is actually a confusing issue. And if I'm completely honest, I was quite confused about this for a long time. And I looked it up a few times. And I think only now I feel like really comfortable with understanding this particular issue. Because obviously we grow up and we learn that, look, one sheep or one goat counts for one person, right? And a camel or a cow or a bull, that counts for 7 shares. So now we're saying that if one person in the household does it, then it suffices for everybody. So here's where the confusion comes in, right? What we are saying is that one sheep does only count for one person's full udhiyah, right? So let's say if I do the udhiyah, then it's only going to count for me. That's my udhiyah that I did. I spent the money on purchasing the sheep. I intended to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it will count for me. But as far as the emphasized request for everyone to do it, that emphasized request falls away from the rest of my family because it's already been fulfilled with my sacrifice, right? And evidence for this is found in a narration wherein the Prophet ﷺ sacrificed 2 sheep, right? One, he said, this is on behalf of Muhammad ﷺ and his family. And the second one, he said, this is on behalf on my ummah. And this was the mercy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if we can afford to do so, inshallah, also intend for the Prophet alayhi wasallam and his family to share in the reward. So herein lies the second half of the mystery, right? What the Prophet alayhi wasallam did there was to say, this is on behalf of myself and my family. How so? Because the person who offers the sacrifice, like the person who's going to have that sheep slaughtered or slaughter it himself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that person can allow others to share in his or her reward. How do they do so? By simply having the intention. So when they have the sacrifice done, they intend, oh Allah, this is on behalf of myself and my family. Oh Allah, this is on behalf of myself and my community. Oh Allah, this is on behalf of myself and the entire ummah, right? And remember, whenever it comes to matters of this nature, right, where we intend reward for others, don't fall into the trap of thinking that you are diluting the potency of your sacrifice by sharing in the sharing others in the reward along with you, because this is Allah we are speaking about. Right? Allah, His reward is infinite, and we should try to share in when we make dua for people, when we give sadaqah and we intended the good deeds to be shared with others. Don't be shy in terms of sharing that, because there's a lot of love to go around, right? There's a lot of love to go around, and Allah Azza wa Jal will reward you for being so generous and thinking of others in the process. Now again, we said for the Shafi'is, it is sunnah mu'akkada ala al-kifaya, right? So obviously then, this is not going to be applicable for the Hanafis, because in the Hanafi school, Qurbani is regarded as wajib, meaning compulsory. Now there is a difference between wajib and fard in the Hanafi school of thought. If you follow the Hanafi madhab, you would know this, right? But it is also important to know that there's some leeway, because wajib isn't at the same rank as fard, right? I'm not going to get into the details of that because that's Islamic legal theory, and it would be more appropriate for a Hanafi trained scholar to get into that. And the idea is that every person who is muqim, who is a resident, is not a traveler, is not outside of the axis of his wealth, and he possesses the silver nisab, which amounts to 613.35 grams, right? Or its equivalent in monetary value, or its equivalent in personal ornaments, in stock in trade, or any other form of wealth that is surplus to his or her basic needs. So it's not as restrictive as one might think, because you consider the things that you possess as well. Then each adult member of a family who possesses that much wealth must perform his or her own Qurbani separately, right? That is how the difference plays in terms of the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school. So beyond that, what I said initially still applies, right? If you can't afford, if you're struggling to make ends meet, you have debt, you don't have enough to actually pay for the animals to be sacrificed, because it can really become expensive, then that, in terms of the Hanafi school, that obligation is lifted from you, and you don't have to fret about that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enrich us with beneficial wealth that we can use for His sake, and that we can use in a way that would be pleasing to Him. I don't believe it's a good thing to ask for more wealth. I genuinely don't. I believe that it is good to ask for beneficial wealth, because a lot of us think that, if only I had more money, but we don't quite think about how would we be if Allah were to bless us with that money. Are we still going to be the same, or are our needs all of a sudden going to increase, and our, what they call standard of living, would that increase? Or would we become more charitable because we have more? So if you pray to Allah for more money, ask Allah to grant you beneficial rizq, not just money unrestrictedly, because we don't know the outcome of that. Tayyib. So now we can move on to the next question, inshallah, which is, what kind of animals can be slaughtered? This is a funny one, because I remember, I think it was last year, it was around Eid al-Adha time. I went for a run. I had my earpods in. I was listening to a podcast, and then the podcast was talking about, like, these new movements that spring up out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden they push for things, and we're living in the time of that. So this one movement was saying that, look, they do vegetarian Qurbani. So because of the movement towards animal rights and so on, which we all regard as something that is important to protect the rights of animals, this particular movement, it promotes that, no, instead of sacrificing an animal for Eid al-Adha, you buy a hamper of vegetables and you give that to the poor, and that would be your sacrifice, which of course is not valid as an udhiyah. So that's why I'm just laughing, because these type of things also exist, but we will explain what the different animals are, inshallah ta'ala. So in terms of the Sharia, and this is across the board, right, not specific to the Shafi'i school, it is only valid to sacrifice camels, cattle, sheep, or goats, right? There are specific restrictions for camels. Camels must be over 5 years of age. Cows and goats must be over 2 years of age, and sheep must be either over 1 year of age, or if it's after 6 months, then that's also valid, but the front, what do they call it, incisors? The two front teeth, basically, the front teeth must have fallen out. So that's an indication that the animal has reached the age of maturity. So as young as 6 months, it can be sacrificed if the teeth had fallen out. That's for the sheep. But for cows and for goats, it has to be 2 years or older. For camels, it has to be 5 years or older, and Allah knows best. Now remember, this is specifically for udhiyah. This doesn't mean that those animals cannot be sacrificed at other times, right? This is just what type of animals would qualify for the udhiyah, for the qurban, so to speak. The other issue is that it doesn't matter whether the animals are male or female, right? They are both valid to be slaughtered. There's absolute gender equality for the animals there. Camels and cows fulfill the sunnah for 7 people, as we explained earlier on, and can be shared among them, while sheep and goats, they cannot be shared by multiple people, since they only fulfill the sunnah for a single person. Then very importantly, and because I think it was 2 years ago, and the year before that, and I think about 2 or 3 years in a row, where I also got involved in, selling sheep with a colleague of mine, and then carrying out the sacrifice on Eid. It was a nice experience. I don't do it any longer. But what I saw, during that time period, is that people go into their sacrifices, or they select animals and so on, but they just do it because they want to do it, or because they know that that's what you should be doing on the day of Eid. And that's fine. It is still ta'ah, it is still obedience to Allah. But as a Muslim, no matter what you undertake in life, if it is an act of ibadah, never just jump into the act without seeking the necessary knowledge to fulfill that, right? Some of the things that we've seen, quite regularly is defective animals. People sometimes get the animals ahead of time. They don't treat the animal properly. I've seen animals that have fallen off the back of a bakkie, broken its leg, animals that were attacked by a dog and it has a limp, etc. This is all problematic because any defect that diminishes the quality of the meat of the animal, right? It would not be valid to slaughter such an animal, such as lameness, blindness, insanity. So if the animal is rabid, right? Or not a rabbit, if the animal is rabid, in other words, it has rabies, or some other form of disease that would cause a defect in the meat or in the amount of meat to be expected in the animal, or if the animal is obviously sick, right? There are some more details in relation to this, but this is a general guideline as to what type of animals can be slaughtered. Again, this does not mean that the animal, if it is slaughtered, it is going to be haram meat. No, this is just about animals in relation to its validity as an Eid sacrifice, as a Qurban, as an Udhiyah, and Allah knows best. طيب. Then, do I have to slaughter myself is the next question that we are dealing with. Do I have to slaughter myself? If you are a male and you are of age and you are thinking about slaughtering yourself, then I would actually go as far as encouraging you to do so on condition that you do so having arranged with a reliable, experienced slaughterer, if I can call it that, who can actually be there to train you on the day that you are going to carry out your sacrifice and practically hold your hand as you do so, because this is not something that you go and experiment with, right? When I started sacrificing myself, I used to go to my uncle, he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala. He was like, I've never seen an expert as expert as he. Right? He used to be lightning quick. You literally don't get a chance to see the knife and the animal is slaughtered. And I'm not exaggerating. Like the one moment he stands with his hand behind his back, right? And the next moment he bends down and the next moment the animal is slaughtered. You never see the knife. So he was really, really amazing at that. So even though, I mean, it's a simple thing. You take a knife, you put it to the animal's neck, you slaughter. It seems that way, but it requires a certain level of confidence, a certain level of knowledge, and a certain level of expertise. Knowledge, because there's fiqh in relation to the sacrifice, right? And that fiqh teaches you exactly what must be severed and what doesn't need to be severed and what shouldn't be severed. So if you want to do your sacrifice, I would encourage you to do it. It's a good thing to do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also be willing to learn, right, what is required, and also be willing to learn the experience from somebody who can offer that to you bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So now what is the ruling in relation to this? Right? What's the fiqh in relation to the slaughtering by oneself? It is regarded as sunnah for males to slaughter themselves, to slaughter their own animals, if they can slaughter well. Although it is valid to commission, which is to do a wakala, to make wakil, someone else to do it on their behalf, right? If one cannot slaughter well, so if you are unable to deal with the sacrifice yourself, or you are a lady and you don't feel comfortable with it, it is then sunnah, the moment you're not comfortable with it, you don't feel as though you are competent enough to handle that, it is then sunnah to commission someone else to do so on your behalf. And if one commissions another to do the sacrifice, it is sunnah to be present, but it is also not necessary, right? Some people think that it is a must, that they must be there, they must see it, they must witness the actual slaughter, and the person who sacrifices must say the name of the person. These are all, it's not necessary for your sacrifice to be valid. Allah Azza wa Jal knows your intention, and it is sufficient when you make the person wakil to do your sacrifice, you commission them, please conduct the sacrifice on my behalf. If the person accepts that and you trust the person, Bismillah. And this allows us the chance to also speak about another important phenomenon, which is don't just let any person, handle your sacrifice. So the first person with the picture of an advertisement, you say, okay, yes, I'm going to purchase my sheep from this person or from this farm or whatever the case may be. Why? Because it's the cheapest. Do not let that be your only criteria, right? This is dangerous because who is going to actually conduct the sacrifice? Ideally, you want to go with an organization or with an individual who is either an alim or has ulama who would be consulted throughout the process, right? There are various issues that come up. We don't have the chance to get into all of them. But in terms of the meat distribution, in terms of handling the animals, in terms of being merciful and kind towards the animals, in terms of making sure that your sacrifice is conducted according to the rules of the Sharia, in order to ensure that there's consciousness with the slaughterer, that the slaughterer is treated well, that they have a fresh mind. Why is this important? If you're sacrificing 150 sheep, man alone on the day of Eid, chances are you're going to start becoming neglectful, right? So be careful in relation to this, right? You can, obviously, with trusted organizations, there's no problem whatsoever, but you need to do your homework in that regard. I know, as I said, Muslims Connected, they'll be doing Qurbani in Malawi. I see the message has been posted up here in the chat. And as you can see, 950 Rand or $50 in Malawi is very cheap, right? A lamb here in Cape Town, South Africa at the moment is about 2,000, 2,600, etc. So, Bismillah, but do your homework. Now, as for witnessing the sacrifice, the first thing is, what is better? What is better? Is it better to do your own sacrifice at home, right? As it was mostly done in our history, where you have the sacrifice at home and you invite your family and it's a spectacle in that sense? Or is it better to conduct this at the farm? In terms of family ties and in terms of cultural values and in terms of, bringing the people close together and witnessing the sacrifice, yes, at home, it's really nice. But for every other reason, it's probably more convenient, easier, more likely that you would do it frequently if it is done at a farm. And the choice is really up to you. What I do notice, however, is that when people are unable to afford many sheep, many animals, if they can only afford one sheep, no, that they do at the farm. But when they can afford more sheep, no, then they do it at home. So I don't know what the purpose is for that, but it should never be a matter of showing off, to show people, oh, look, I've got 7, 8, 9, 10 sheep. It's not about the size of the sheep. It's not about the number of animals. It's about the motivation and the intention behind why you are doing what you are doing. So do keep that in mind. As far as the witnessing is concerned, the Prophet ﷺ, he encouraged Sayyida Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. He said, stand up to your udhiyah. Stand up to your udhiyah and witness it. For at the first drop of its blood, all your previous sins will be forgiven. Subhanallah. If I can be personal, I would like to share the fact that as brutal as it may seem to the onlooker, right? Especially if you've never witnessed the sacrificial process before, it is a very spiritual experience. If your heart is in the right place and you are doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then subhanallah, it is really a moving experience. If you can manage to keep that level of sensibility with you and that spirituality with you, it would be very sad if through the actions of this ummah and through the misunderstanding that is often created around the udhiyah, that we were deprived of being able to undertake this ritual for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah grant us the understanding and allow us to do things excellently. Excuse me. طيب. If you slaughter by yourself, in other words, if you conduct the slaughtering yourself, then at the time of doing the sacrifice, this is when you have the niyyah, right? And your niyyah is not the words that you utter. In all of our ibadat, you never ever have to say out loud, indeed, I intend, in any language. You never have to do that. It's recommended in the Shafi'i school to do that. But remember, the purpose behind the recommendation in the Shafi'i madhab is liyusa'idu lisanuka, is in order for your tongue to assist qalbaka, your heart. But if your tongue is not assisting your heart, but rather your tongue is making your heart more confused because you are more focused on what you need to utter than you are on the engagement of the act itself, then that defeats the purpose, right? So it's not about what you utter with your tongue, it's what is in the heart. So at the time of sacrificing, that is when you have the intention to do the sunnah sacrifice of Eid al-Adha, and that's it. That's it. If it's on behalf of yourself, then that suffices. If it's on behalf of somebody else, then you have the intention for that person in one's heart. And similarly, if you commission someone else to do the sacrifice on your behalf, then you can intend, when you authorize them, to slaughter on your behalf. So at the time of authorizing them, or at the time, let's say you're doing it with Muslims Connected, right? So you contact them, you pay the money, and you tell them, look, I'd like you to do this on my behalf, so I commission you to do so in Malawi. And then that's sufficient. You don't need to do anything beyond that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. In actual fact, the next question deals with this exact issue, which is, can I commission a trustworthy Muslim to slaughter on my behalf in another country? Can I commission a trustworthy Muslim to slaughter on my behalf in another country? Right? So we've been saying Muslims Connected is doing it in Malawi. I've seen people doing it in Palestine, especially relief organizations. They do it in Palestine, they do it in India, Bangladesh, various countries in the world, right? Because there's a need there. So the answer to this is that it is absolutely valid to give someone money and commission him to buy an animal and slaughter it in another country other than where you are living, right? So the same thing applies to the Hanafi school, right? If you want to do it in a different country or completely done by somebody else, the Hanafi school, however, they say specifically that as for getting the Qurbani done in other places, one deprives oneself from all of the aforementioned blessings in terms of doing it yourself and connecting with it and so forth. So there's an opinion there that it would deprive you of some of the blessings there. But if it is carried out on account of udhr, like a genuine excuse, either disability, or you can't afford to do it in your own country, or there's a real need in the other country, so there's a genuine excuse, it's not that you're just foregoing the thing by yourself, then you can still hope for the entire reward or even more reward depending on the reason for you doing it as such. But still there, the ideal would be to do it yourself, and Allah knows best, right? Which is a worthwhile consideration, because like with zakah, why would you be giving it elsewhere if you can do it locally? However, as I mentioned, it's not like people are doing it in other countries for the fun of it, right? They are doing it because there's severe need there. So I do believe that this is completely in order based on the Hanafi view as well. They also add that if the agent who has been appointed to carry out your ritual slaughter does so within the stipulated time in the country where he or she is slaughtering, then it will be valid still. Right? This is regardless of whether the time for that ritual sacrifice begins earlier in that country than it does in yours, because that's the other important issue. As you know, some Muslims around the world, they have different sightings of the moon. So depending on their sighting of the moon, they may either be having Eid earlier than you are, or they'll be having Eid later than you are. And it's funny how people get caught up with these things, because if you really think about it on a global level, there's all these fights that happen. But if you're living in, say, Fiji, is it Fiji or Fuji? I forget the name. I think it's Fiji, or Australia or New Zealand for that matter. They are going to be doing some of the things even before the Hujjaj, right? So this type of argument is completely unnecessary. What it really comes down to, let the fuqaha discuss the differences of opinion, right? When it comes to our practice and what your country should do and what your people should do, it's easy. You just follow the legal authority as far as religion is concerned. Some places have a central ulama body that makes these decisions, but not all minorities have that privilege. So when a decision is made from a centralized body, then everybody follows in that decision, because that is how unity is maintained. Unity is not maintained where all the Muslims are doing the same things at the same time. So that again leads us into the next question, which is now, okay, we said during the valid time to slaughter. So when exactly is the valid time to slaughter? So the time for slaughtering enters after sunrise, right? Once enough time has passed to perform the Eid Salah, basically, right? As well as 2 khutbahs along with that. So if enough time, let's use our time as a practical example. Sunrise, the sun starts to rise now at about 10 to 8. I could be slightly off. So I assume that Ishraq time would come in at about 12 minutes past, 30 minutes past 8. Therefore, once you hit Ishraq time, the time when it's now permissible to conduct the Eid Salah and the 2 sermons, you can count about 15 to 30 minutes to be safe after that. And that is now the time when it is valid to start with your sacrifices. So in other words, after the Eid processions. So for us now, that's going to be at about, to be safe, I would say at about 9, earliest like 8:45. Why? Because the time for slaughtering enters after sunrise. Once enough time has passed to perform 2 rak'ats, 2 short rak'ats of the Eid Salah and 2 short khutbahs. You don't have to consider like the whole khutbah. So maybe if you really want to do it early, you could say, well, I could finish the Salah in like less than 5 minutes, and I could finish the 2 khutbahs in less than, Allah knows best. But I would say that to be safe, where we are currently in terms of Cape Town, South Africa, and the winter times that we have at present, with Fajr being extremely late, unfortunately for those who want to do everything in the morning of Eid, the earliest time to be safe with your sacrifice, as far as I know, would be at about 8:45, 9 o'clock, right? Why? Because that would be the amount of time required to make your Eid Salah plus the 2 khutbahs, and Allah knows best. Before this time, it would not be valid. It remains valid, however, to continue slaughtering the next day. In other words, that entire day, even that night, the next day, and the next day. So up until the 13th of Dhul Hijjah, until sunset. So remember, we stopped with the takbir after Asr on the 13th of Dhul Hijjah, but the slaughter is still valid until sunset. Now, even though it is permissible, like, you can do it at night, it is considered makruh, it is considered disliked to do so during the night. I'm not mentioning the references of everything that I've said so far. I'll send the notes to Muslims Connected, inshallah. So those interested in the reference, because it's literally going to be after every sentence, after every 2 sentences, then I'll be mentioning Al-Yaqut al-Nafis, Fil Madhab ibn Idris, Mughni al-Muhtaj, Khatib al-Shirbini, and so on. So I'm just sticking to the, answering the question. And those who are interested in finding the references for this, by all means, we would make that available to you, inshallah ta'ala. And then as for the Hanafi school, the Hanafi school mentions that if somebody out of his or her ignorance and negligence did not offer the Qurbani on the 3 prescribed days, the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th of Dhul Hijjah, so they've got The 3 prescribed days is the 10th, the 11th, and the 12th. The 10th is Yawmul Eid, right? Then on the 11th, right, and on the 12th. So they don't include the 13th. They should then give the price of the Qurbani. So if you've neglected to do it on those days, then instead of offering the sacrifice, they should offer the price of it as a sadaqah. So this does not mean that sadaqah in the Hanafi school is an alternative to the Qurban itself. But it will only be an alternative when the person did not offer the sacrifice on the prescribed days. Therefore, according to this opinion in the Hanafi school, there is no alternative to Qurbani. There's no, you can either do this or you can do that. You must make sure that it is done either on the day of Eid, Eid al-Adha, or the following day, the 11th of Dhul Hijjah, or the following day, the 12th of Dhul Hijjah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. Okay, how far are we? We've got 1, 2 questions left, inshallah. And we've already run out of time. So let me try to do this as briefly as possible. The first question is, what should you do with the meat? Okay. If you did a sacrifice because it was obligatory. Now we said in the Shafi'i school, it can only be obligatory if you make a vow. Okay. So if that is the case, then you must give away the entire animal in sadaqah. Everything, including what we refer to as offal or afal in Afrikaans, right? This is the hide, the horns, the hooves, alles, right? Everything. And it is forbidden, it is haram for you to eat of it. This is if it is a vow, if it is compulsory. And there's only one way to make it compulsory. If, however, it is the usual case, which is a sunnah, the sunnah of the sacrifice, the sunnah mu'akkada as we've explained, then it is permissible for you to eat of the meat. It is permissible for you to give of the meat. It is permissible for you to divide it into threes. You have options. What is obligatory is that you must give some of it away in sadaqah. How much? Some of it. Any amount that is considered of its meat, you should give that away in sadaqah. The rest of it, you can do with it what you feel fit. The sunnah recommendation is to cut it divide it rather according to the thirds. A third for yourself and your family, a third to give away in gifts, and a third in sadaqah. But you could, if you want, give everything in sadaqah. You could, if you want, give everything as gifts and just a bit in sadaqah. You even could consume the entire thing and just give some of it in sadaqah. So if it is that you can barely afford to do the Qurban, and as a result of it, you're not going to have meat in your home, then you can do a 2-in-1. Your family can eat of this meat and give some sadaqah of the rest of it. And there you go, right? So there's a lot of flexibility in this regard. So to reiterate, if the sacrifice was a sunnah, meaning that one did not vow it, then it is permissible to eat of the meat, although some of it must be given in sadaqah. Again, how much is that? Some. How do you quantify that? It mustn't be like a trivial amount, like you gave a cube of meat in sadaqah. It must be, a bag of meat, a hamper of meat for the very least. And Allah knows best. It is recommended, it is encouraged to give all of the meat away in sadaqah. So if you can manage to do that, bismillah, right? But it is also encouraged that you do eat of the meat yourself. And I have no idea why people have this notion that, no, I don't eat Qurban meat, right? I believe that the only reason people have this aversion to eating the meat of their sacrifice is because they purchased, most of the time, inferior animals. Because when people go to the market to buy animals, what are they looking for? They're looking for the biggest, fattest sheep. And generally, the biggest sheep tend to be the oldest sheep, and the oldest sheep tend to have the toughest meat. And then on top of it, the sheep that are made available in the Qurban market are the types of sheep that the farmer couldn't sell to the abattoirs, right? So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. But if you're looking for good quality meat, you're better off getting a lamb than you are getting the big sheep, right? And of course, that's something that only those in the know would sort of appreciate and go for, and Allah knows best. It is regarded as a sunnah also to eat a few morsels of the liver. A common a common practice in this regard is to take off the liver as soon as as it is available and taken out of the animal, to then cook it up or fry it up in some way and then and eat of it, right? In fact, this would be the breaking of the fast, because I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it is sunnah on the day of Eid al-Adha to not eat anything until after you've returned from the Eid Salah, and then only to eat. And then the practice generally would be to eat of the animal that you sacrifice, and that is what would break your fast. It's not really a fast. It's like a kind of a fast on the day of Eid al-Adha, and the reverse is true on Eid al-Fitr. It is also common practice in many Muslim lands to give 1/3 in charity, 1/3 as gift, and 1/3 for oneself, and this is completely acceptable. It is important to note that when we speak about the charity year, that this must be given to people who qualify as recipients of zakah, right? This must be given to people who qualify as recipients of zakah. It must go to the underprivileged of society, and specifically, it must go to the Muslims, right? It must go to the Muslims primarily, okay? This is not like any meat or any type of donation. This is an act of ibadah. So the whole process is going to be considered ibadah. It is not necessary to give more than one person. You don't have to go distribute to people. But very importantly, and this is something that a lot of people miss, the meat of your udhiyah must be given uncooked. The meat of your udhiyah must be given uncooked. It is not for you to go and make a pot of food with the meat that is supposed to be given in sadaqah. Remember, you can distribute the meat as you so wish, but you must give a segment of it in charity. Now, that segment that you give in charity must be given uncooked, okay? What you do with your own parts is up to you, but what you must give must be given uncooked. Furthermore, it is invalid to sell any of the animal, right? Don't go make a business with even the things that are regarded as the offal. Don't sell it, the skins, etc. I know there are people who make business like this, but you shouldn't be doing that. And if the sacrifice was not obligatory, if it was not compulsory, then you may give the skin away, the hide, you can give it away, but you can't sell it, right? You can even use it, you can gift it, etc., but you cannot sell it. As for the offal, right, the offal, number one, it is not permissible to give this as payment, not for the butcher or anyone else involved. It is not permissible to give meat as payment for the people involved. You should pay them as they should be paid, right? These are human beings. It is very sickening to see how Muslims can treat other people as slaves at times on the sacred day, right? That you should be sharing in the gifts of the day and the blessings of the day, not treating people as slaves. So you cannot give the meat to non-Muslims because of the nature of this ibadah. But what about the offal? So I spoke to my teacher, rahimahullah, Maulana Taha Karan, and he mentioned, look, if it is such that those elements are going to be thrown away, right? So what Muslims generally do with the offal is they bury it. If you do it at home, you tend to bury it. If that is the case and you're going to throw it away, that you can definitely give to people who would be willing to take it and are going to use it to consume, because that's not considered of the meat that you must give away in sadaqah, and Allah knows best. If you want to give the butcher a gift of some meat, right, then that's permissible, but it is not allowed if you had vowed to do that sacrifice. In other words, if it is obligatory. If it is a normal sacrifice, a sunnah sacrifice, it's permissible to give the butcher some of the meat if he is poor and if he is needy, and Allah knows best. It is considered haram to give or to feed any of the sacrificial animal to a non-Muslim. The exception is what I mentioned a moment ago regarding the offal. Now, finally, in relation to the Hanafi school, the person offering the Qurbani can keep all of its meat for his own use, right? The person offering the Qurbani can keep all of its meat for his own use. However, it is still preferable to distribute 1/3 among the poor, 1/3 among his friends, and 1/3 among relatives. Friends and relatives, and then 1/3 for himself, his own relatives, right? If it is possible, one should eat of the meat on that very day as a recommendation in the Hanafi school as well. And then finally, in relation to the person doing the Qurban, the person doing the Udhiyah, I'm hoping that most people would know this by now, but it is considered makruh, disliked, if you are going to do a sacrifice, to remove any hair or nails from one's body or from one's head from the first of Dhul Hijjah until one performs the sacrifice. So the hair includes all the hair of the body, right? Whether it's from the head, the beard, the mustache, the armpits, the private parts, etc. You'd have to go beast mode for the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. If you forgot to get your hair cut and you forgot to do grooming, you'd have to stay like that. Not because it's haram to remove it, but because it's makruh to remove it. It's disliked, it's reprehensible, and you'll get rewarded for following the rule and not removing it. Some Shafi'is, they regard the removal of one's hair or nails during this period as haram. Some Shafi'is. But that's not the mu'tamad view in the Shafi'i madhab. It's not the relied upon view in the Shafi'i madhab. The specific ruling comes from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Imam Muslim in his Sahih, that specifically says, when you see the moon of Dhul Hijjah, which is a hadith that I actually find very interesting in relation to the whole debate, moon, no moon type of thing. When you see the moon of Dhul Hijjah and you intend to perform the sacrifice, then don't remove, don't touch, is actually what he says, don't touch any of your hair or nails. As for the Hanafi school, they say that after sighting the moon of Dhul Hijjah, it is desirable for a man who intends to make a sacrifice to refrain from cutting the hair of his body and his nails, until he has slaughtered the animal. So they also regard it as sunnah. This is because he's making the sacrifice in lieu of the sacrifice of his own life. Right? It is representing you. So each part of the animal is sort of a representation of yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ commanded us to do so. So we should follow we should follow in that, inshallah ta'ala. They also make another interesting, I don't know if you can call it an exception, but they say that the Prophet ﷺ, he gave this order that no part of his body may be absent at the time of the descent of the divine mercy. However, they add that if more than 40 days have passed, since you removed the hair that you normally are supposed to remove as a Muslim, right? Pubic hair, hair from the armpits, etc. If more than 40 days had passed, that one should not be idle in removing unwanted hair, nails, etc., in order to save yourself from the karaha, which is the abomination. In other words, it is regarded as makruh then. So you should make sure that you're not guilty of the karaha of removing the hair and nails during the 10 days, but also save yourself from the karaha of waiting for longer than 40 days to follow in those particular sunan. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. Sure, I'm out of breath. That was the set of questions that we set out to answer, alhamdulillah. And I hope, inshallah, that was of benefit. I'm going to ask that whatever questions that come through so far, I'm going to read through that quickly, and then the admin can just let me know if I need to cut things right here, right now. Let's look at the bottom. There's 4. I'd like to ask, what does it mean? Look, the question is about aqiqah. If the aqiqah was not done when the person was a child and the child is now mukallaf, is that bad? It's certainly not a sin. It is not regarded as a compulsory act. And obviously the child is not going to be held accountable for that either, because it wasn't the child's responsibility. But is it bad in the sense that it should have been done? Yes, it should have been done. But Allah knows best. You ask Allah that you can improve and you can do things better in the future, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and you move on from there. What is the ruling for distribution when it comes to aqiqah? No, the three parts, that is not applicable. For aqiqah, it's recommended that the bones are not to be broken. That's the one recommendation. And it's recommended to give sadaqah of it, and it's recommended to make something sweet of it and to give that to family. Also, the difference is that aqiqah, look, I didn't read everything in relation to aqiqah, but aqiqah can be given, and it's actually recommended to be given in a sweet dish, so cooked, in other words, as opposed to the udhiyah, which should be given as raw meat. Does the not removal of the hair and nails apply for females as well? Yes. If a lady had intended for the udhiyah, then for the first 10 days of the Hijjah, you should do that as well. Yeah, well, look, you'll find a lot of people saying a lot of things. I'm not going to read out. You were a bit specific in your question, but in relation to what I mentioned, who the meat can be given to, I'll give you the reference if you so wish. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So there was quite a lot that we went through. So the references, and again, I'm speaking specifically in relation to the Shafi'i school. You can refer to the following works: Al-Yaqut al-Nafis, which is a more big, it's not one of the books upon which fatwa is given, but Tuhfatul Muhtaj. This is a book that fatwa is given from. And Hashia, excuse me, and the Hashiyat on the Tuhfa as well. That is the reference for the distribution of meat and the unlawful nature of giving it to the non-Muslims. So that is the ruling, the mu'tamad view according to the Shafi'i school. And there's no need to be confused. What you have to do is go to scholars that you trust, and they know what they're speaking about, and they are qualified, and they have the reference material. And it's not about who said what, right? It's not about, yeah, but this Maulana said or that Maulana said. It's about hatu burhanakum. It's everything in Islam is based on evidence. And when we speak on behalf of a madhab, then we have to get the information from the books of that madhab, and we have to be able to reproduce. So I don't know exactly what you've heard, and I can't speak on behalf of anyone else, but that is the view of the Shafi'i school, and Allah knows best. From what age is a child eligible for Qurbani? When they become mukallaf, right? That's when they become mukallaf. They are as children, prepubescent. They don't need to do Qurbani because, as much as they don't need to make salah in the sense, because the salah is not obligatory upon them, the same thing applies for the other matters of sunnah mu'akkada and the like. If you do it on their behalf, it's valid, right? It's valid. And if you can afford to do so, it's valid. What part can't be eaten of the sacrifice? I don't understand. What parts can't be eaten? As in, what is unlawful? As far as I know, nothing is unlawful. But if you mean in terms of the meat distribution, then a portion must be given in sadaqah. So technically, then I could say, look, the entire thing can't be eaten. If you're going to eat literally everything, that's wrong. You should give some in sadaqah. But other than that, I don't know of specific parts that cannot be eaten, and Allah knows best. Right? That's everything as far as I can see. Barakallahu feekum. I hope this was of benefit to you all, inshallah. Widad still has a hand up since the beginning of the class. Widad, is this because you want to speak or ask a question, or is it just that your hand is up accidentally? You can let me know. I'll give you a minute for that. Furthermore, I'd like to remind those of you who joined us perhaps a bit later that inshallah, very soon, when I say very soon, I mean, I think next week, if I'm not mistaken, we start on the admin, people in the admin, if you can just remind me the exact date that we start the Mighty Believers course. But I'm doing a 4-week course with Muslims Connected, inshallah ta'ala, on Islam and wellness, Islam and health. And it's with Muslims Connected. The adverts have gone out already. You can register already. You can check the website for that, or you can message the number that they've posted in the details there. It's important for anyone who understands that Islam is a holistic way of life, and no problem with that, Allah bless you, that Islam is a holistic way of life. And if you believe that Islam is a holistic way of life, then you know Islam has something to say about your nutrition. Islam has something to say about your level of fitness. And we want to join that together, inshallah ta'ala. So whether you are a complete couch potato and beginner and you've never lifted a foot towards exercise before, or whether you are active and you've been on a health journey, but you'd like to make sure that everything you do is congruent with Islam, or you need some guidelines in that regard, this course will be perfect for you, inshallah ta'ala. It's only 4 weeks, but it's ideal. It's an ideal way of really bringing everything full circle. So it's your Iman and your Islam and your Ihsan, by making sure that every aspect of your life, even your health journey, is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khair, barakallah fikum. Please remember us in your prayers. Enjoy your Eid. Enjoy your fasting on the day of Arafah. The 9th of Dhul Hijjah is the day of Arafah. And do remember us in your prayers on that day and in every other day of Dhul Hijjah, myself and my family as well. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad, subhanallahi wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu